Hey, it's the Clockwork Mage and this broadcast spell is live. Welcome back, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about good versus bad encounters in Dungeons & Dragons. And this can really be taken into every tabletop RPG, so hopefully you'll be able to learn something from this. But before we can even move forward, we have to define what is a good versus a bad encounter. So to define a good encounter, it would be an encounter where you and the party members both had fun. It was very intriguing, and there were some not so straightforward parts of the encounter that made it interesting. Now, this could be very minor or be the whole half of the encounter. And to give an example, that's kind of like the second health bar in a boss fight in video games. That is that unexpected part of the game. This will create tension, and this encounter will create fun memories for everyone to remember. It should be challenging at the very least as well. If it's not challenging, then how much fun is it really if they're just going to steamroll every encounter? Now, this isn't going to be the case for every single encounter. Some really fun encounters can be steamrolling the enemy, and there are times for that. Or some really fun encounters are where there's only one player left standing. Again, there are times for this. But for the general rule of thumb for general encounters, you should kind of follow that criteria of it should be challenging, intriguing, and most of all, it should be fun. Now, a bad encounter. A bad encounter is just something that doesn't encompass two of these three aspects. Typically, that's what I would call a bad encounter. Some DMs would say, oh, even if you're missing one, it's a bad encounter. Or some DMs would say, no, you need to miss all three for it to be a really bad encounter. But I'm of the idea where if I'm missing two of my three ideas, then I'm missing it. I don't know what I did wrong. Well, in hindsight, I'd know what I did wrong, but I shouldn't have let it go that far. So to set up a challenging, fun, and intriguing encounter, we'll set up one of the three criteria first. The first one should be challenging. Now, this needs to be challenging, but it shouldn't be death-defying every single time they have an encounter. That's exhausting. Not every single encounter should be you're worried about your character dying. No, that should not happen. That's how you get an exhausted party, and that's how you get a party that wants to avoid encounters. A challenging encounter should be one where it tests the player's combat skills. The way it would do this is by introducing a new mechanic, or maybe they have more numbers than they've ever fought before. Or maybe they're fighting someone that is stronger than them, so they have to work together to fight against him. Now, that's very typical for a D&D party to fight a soul person that is stronger than even the combined parties might. If you expect them to defeat him, they shouldn't be worried for their life unless this is the final boss and it's like a Dreadlich or something like that. But if it's not and it's just some random Joe Schmo encounter, they should not feel like they're destined to die. Now, they should feel like there is peril, and if they make too many mistakes, they will die, but they shouldn't feel like they are going to die. I have to make that clear because I know some DMs that think a challenging encounter is one where only one person is up and the others are incapacitated, and that's the end of the encounter, and that's a normal basic encounter of like goblins or something like that. No, it should not be that. You should reserve that for the epic moments of the game. So for an example of a challenging encounter, imagine that you have a balanced party of 4 third level players. You then have them fight against, say, a pack of goblins. Now, this pack of goblins, you understand that since they're low level, maybe the spellcasters can't fight as much. So what I like to do is to make it a challenge, I give 2 goblins per melee and half caster that we have, and then 1 goblin per full caster that we have. This makes it challenging, and immediately they should be swarmed by more monsters than there are players. And this creates a swarm tactic where, oh, we are in peril, but they are just goblins. They should be able to take care of them pretty neatly, but still pose a challenge. You have, say, for example, it would be 6 goblins, and your party is now fighting all 6 goblins. As you would imagine, this should go pretty smoothly. Your party members shouldn't feel like they're going to die. They should feel confident in this fight, but they know that they need to play it carefully and they need to play it safe. But this leads into my next idea to make a good encounter. Make it intriguing. Add something that is out of the norm. Add something that makes them think about the encounter and makes it that much more special. Something as simple as a goblin having a harpoon crossbow would make this all the more interesting. So you could have one goblin have a harpoon crossbow where they fire a harpoon bolt and it stabs into one of, say, the spellcasters. Then the goblin starts pulling at the spellcaster, and now a party member then has to go and either cut the rope, or the spellcaster has to risk ripping the harpoon out and dealing more damage to himself. Immediately, you've never seen an encounter like that. That would be crazy, and that would be something that could be easily explained in the world. You could say a goblin stole it from someone, or this could end up being a fisherman goblin. Like, there's so much you can do with it with just such a simple idea, and only even one goblin having that crazy twist would create the encounter that is memorable to everyone. They're all going to remember that time that a goblin shot a harpoon into old buddy Owl over there. It's just something like that that's extremely memorable and is very hard to forget. If you want a higher level version of this, what you can do is you can have them pull out a warp scroll or even a gate scroll, so they can gate in something else to add to the fight. And that would create way more drama than it would normally be. Say that they are a lycanthrope and they are a full lycanthrope, so they know everything that's going on around. They then pull out a gate scroll and then they gate something in, something like a fae that is a friend of theirs or something like that. Now, not only do you have to worry about having the alchemic silver for the lycanthrope, but you also need to have the cold iron for the fae. And as a high level fight, you're really testing your players in the idea of they can't use the same weapon to attack both. So they now have to do something different for this high level encounter. And that is what will create more tension. Otherwise, they are going to lose out on potential damage. They're going to have to designate people to specific monsters now. It's a whole headache that completely changes the fight as things kind of show up or change the idea of what the fight's going to be. Now, again, these are just small examples. Another good example that I really like to use in a good encounter is making the terrain an advantage to the enemies. The enemies, typically, if you are going to them, they're not going to fight in terrain that they are bad in fighting in. They are going to fight in a terrain that they have the advantage in and that they've kind of molded a little bit. So, for example, you could have an enemy that is some sort of like archer, a really good sharpshooter. He would have a whole bunch of, say, walls or rocks in front of him, and he'd literally hide behind them and just snipe from behind these rocks. Why would he stand in the open so that he could be charged? It's small things like that that make the fight that much more challenging. And I think that's what adds intrigue to a fight. It's small things that you wouldn't expect, or small things that are hard to overcome despite them being so simple. You can also add completely mind-bending things. So a great example of this is a trickster kind of monster. The one that comes to mind is a hag. So a hag likes to play tricks on the people that opposes her. She likes to go and create illusions, and you have to kind of see through them or see that something's a little off or not right. There's a whole bunch of trickster stuff that is really mind-bending that you can go into as well. Now, of course, that's normally part of the monster, but you can have that be part of an intelligent creature as well. Just anyone that would like to play those tricks and make something a little harder for the people that opposes them. For the last one, make it fun. This is the hardest one, and this is the hardest one I have, because making an encounter fun can even come down to the reason why they are fighting in the first place. If they feel like they don't have a good reason to be fighting this, or you've kind of shoehorned them into it, it's not going to be fun. It's going to feel like a chore. It's going to feel like a task that they have to complete to move forward. There has to be a reason that you are doing this. And that reason creates the fun. It creates the air of why they're doing something, or even the intensity of something. So, for example, say in the goblin example, the goblins kidnapped someone. your party's gonna save them because they're heroes. But if you just threw a bunch of goblins in their path as they're walking from town to town, it's not as well-meaning, and it doesn't feel as good for just a random encounter of goblins to kind of beat them up like that. You have to have a reason for them to really engage in the fight. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, random encounters are good and they should be done. And I use random encounters every now and then at least. And I think they create for great fun, and they shouldn't be something that the party dwells on unless that small random encounter is leading into a bigger plot. Back to my point, you should really just try to give them a good reason to have that encounter in the first place. Also, all of your players are going to have different ways that they find an encounter to be fun. I highly suggest talking to your players about what they find fun about an encounter in Dungeons & Dragons, because it can be different from everyone. I know some players, they quite enjoy just the idea of having a political encounter. So that would be just talking it out, having a battle of wits, and trying to really extract information or trying to figure out something about the plot. I know other players just love the hack and slash. They love to chop a head off, or they like to stab a goblin in the heart, or anything like that. And then other players are the in-between. They like the small niche mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, and they like to have ways to push those mechanics. Or another player might even like just making their character stronger. That's all they want to do, is min-max their character, which this should all be discussed in the beginning of the campaign at session 0. If you haven't seen that video, I'm gonna link it, but please go see my session 0 video about what you should be talking about during session 0. But this should be one of the things you're talking about, is how encounters are going to be done. Now that you know all of the things that make a good encounter, try not to make a bad one. A bad encounter comes in many forms. The way I know I failed an encounter is by 3 criteria that I also have. So even if my encounter meets all 3 of the good things, it could still fail on these other 3 ideas that I have for it. If an encounter isn't memorable, doesn't push a plot, or wasn't fun. If it is none of those 3, it needs to be at least one of them. If it is none of those 3, I have failed the encounter. So a wild encounter needs to be fun because it's not going to push the plot, and most of the time they're not extremely memorable. A plot encounter needs to actually push the plot, which, funny enough, I've seen a lot of DMs where an encounter for the plot didn't push the plot at all. It was just an encounter, which, don't get me wrong, DMs have days where they just need to throw an encounter at you because they didn't have anything that they could give you, or they were tapped out for the week beforehand or anything like that. I get it. I've been there. But I always at least try to follow that criteria. And I try to at least make it engaging enough for my players to love it, even though I'm exhausted. Now, if you guys have any other ideas or criteria for good versus bad encounters, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to chat with me or my community, my Discord link is also linked down below in the description. Now, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.